Alright, so in this, our third video, we'll pick up where Dave left off. He talked about the definitions of semantics and some of the terms that are being used and some of the concepts that we really needed to understand. To then delve into what's new and what's different about semantics versus some of the other technologies that we've all seen and have used in the past. So in this series of slides, we're going to go through and we'll compare relational and NoSQL and semantic on some pretty basic concepts like storage, where relational has been around a very long time. It was built on the premise when storage was very expensive and was really at a premium. It got really, really good at putting a lot of information in as small a space as it possibly could. When NoSQL came along, obviously significantly later, storage wasn't as big a deal, and it simply stores things in key value pairs. Whereas semantic, as we've discussed, uses triples to store things, and that is a single standardized schema. So your schema is fixed in the same way that NoSQL has a fixed schema, but you can also store data in a much more flexible way where you can still have relationships. In the relationship front, relational, of course, is built upon relationships, but the relationships convey meaning through both the table names and the values in those tables. NoSQL takes a stance that there are no relationships that get defined out of the box, if you will, whereas semantics uses relationships at its core to convey meaning in the actual definition of the relationship itself. Someone is a parent, someone is an employee. Those kinds of things convey meaning, and for a human being it's very easy to look at those things and infer additional information about it, but semantics brings that kind of human inference power into the machine world. On the query language, relational uses SQL. We've all used it, we know about it. It's great in that it's a standardized language. There's offshoots, but you can use ANSI SQL in any of the relational databases out there. NoSQL is working on language standardization, but there really hasn't been a big push for it, which means that depending on which NoSQL implementation you're using, you could end up having to modify your code in order to pull the same data out. With semantics, we can use Sparkle, which is in a similar spirit to the original SQL. It is a standardized language where you can use the same set of Sparkle code from triple store to triple store and be able to expect the same results out of different vendors. On the schema maintenance side, relational has that rigid schema. There's good things about it, there's bad things about it. There are a lot of bad things about it now that we're moving into a world where data is flying around at increasing speeds. It's constantly changing. We're dealing with new sources of data, and that rigid schema can be very limiting. With NoSQL, you don't have that issue. The data is completely unstructured. We just have key value pairs, which is great for that sort of application. With semantics, because relationships convey meaning in their definition, when you add data, you can intelligently add that data along with some additional information about it. What does that data mean? Which is why, of course, the technology is called semantics. It conveys meaning in the relationships with the data. Maturity-wise, relational, of course, it's been around for 30 years, very well established. There's lots of vendors to choose from, lots of technology, hardware platforms, tools are fantastic. NoSQL's been probably about 10 years, a little longer, so it's coming along. With semantics, it is relatively young. It's only been around about 5+ years. The theories have been around longer, but the technology itself is still relatively new. On the indexing side, with relational, you have to use indexing in order to achieve performance, but it can be complicated. So you really do need an expert in order to help you get those indexes right if you want a relational system to behave the way you think it should. With NoSQL, it suffers from a similar complexity in doing the indexing. Again, it's vital that you do your indexing properly, even in a NoSQL system. Even though it's comprised of key value pairs, you still have to make sure that you're indexing correctly. With semantic, you can get some indexing automatically. I'm not saying that you can push a button and have all your indexes created right out of the box. That would be great. It's not quite there yet, but some of that indexing complexity can be handled for you. With optional relationships, I've always had an issue with doing optional relationships in relational databases. You have a couple main choices where you can either put null values in or you can put dummy values in where that dummy value represents that there is no relationship there. But you really need to, you can have optional foreign keys, but that makes null checking, and so there's a lot of issues with optional relationships in a relational database. With NoSQL, because we don't have relationships between the data built in. There really aren't any issues with optional relationships. They're all optional. With semantics, all relationships are optional by default, but you can enforce them if you need to. So it's kind of a best of both worlds, where you have the flexibility of being able to give optional relationships sort of full status in the system. They're recognized, they're supported, and you can also enforce them where you need to. On the ecosystem front, and when I say ecosystem, I mean what's the support structure out there, both on the web, with classes, with talent, all of that. With a relational system, it's very, very rich. It's been around a very long time, and most enterprises these days have at least one relational database, which means they have at least one person who's familiar with them. The tooling is great. There's a lot of vendors to choose from. The hardware platforms are specific to relational, so it's very, very well established. With NoSQL, there's a great ecosystem out there in terms of support. There's been a lot of interest in the NoSQL structures. There's a decent number of vendors out there. There's open source choices, but your tooling isn't great yet. It's coming along, but because there's such an open source push with this, the tooling tends to lag. And with Semantic, the ecosystem is coming along, but it is, in all honesty, fairly immature, which is not surprising given that the technology's only really been around 5 years. The tooling is very nascent. We have seen that the tooling is coming along. There is a recognition in the industry that tooling needs to come along, but it's still nowhere near the maturity level that relational has. So we've talked about semantic technology in terms of definitions, and we've compared it to some existing technologies. It does a lot of neat things, but what is it really good at? So we're going to, in the next video, talk about one of the things that, or several of the things that you can actually apply semantics to in a real world situation.